The Bookshelf with Ryan Tubridy is back for a second season. Once again, it's brought to you by Eason, Ireland's favourite bookseller. Eason, of course, have a rich heritage of bookselling since 1886. It's probably where you got your first ever book and maybe your last one and hopefully your next one after you listen to this episode of our podcast. And stay listening for our Ryan Recommends slot, my weekly recommendation, where I'll discuss a book I've read recently that I think you'll really enjoy too. As ever, all the books we discuss on this episode of our podcast are available now in your local Eason store, or indeed order online from easons.com before 6 p.m. for same-day dispatch with free delivery when you spend over a tenner. Eason, be inspired. You're very welcome to The Bookshelf with me, Ryan Tubridy, and today we are very, very happy to have Simon Harris, the Taoiseach of Ireland, joining us. You're very welcome, Taoiseach.
Thank you so much, Ryan. Great to be here.
I could have gone on and on about your past achievements and so on, but the job of Taoiseach means you're ultimately probably the best known person in the country. And let me ask you about being called Taoiseach, because it happens pretty swiftly as soon as you're elected to the job and people stop calling you Minister or Simon or Dad or whatever it might be. How are you coping with that strange nomenclature, if you will?
Well, it happens very quickly, and for the first little while my young children thought I was the peacock because they'd misheard how it was said. So my daddy's now the peacock was what one of my children said to one of her friends.
Yeah.
So look, certainly it's been a big change, and like I've been involved in politics and public life for a significant period of time, even though I'm relatively young. But nothing can quite prepare you. Actually, the best description a senior civil servant gave to me was, you think when you become Taoiseach you're going to be like a super minister, that you're a minister like in charge of a really big department. But actually, that's not what being Taoiseach's about at all. All of a sudden, you're directly responsible for nothing because you have a minister for this and a minister for that, but you're actually responsible for everything.
Right.
And really, it's an entirely different skill set you need. So your job all of a sudden is to bring people together, bang heads together, get people around a table, say, how are we going to fix this? What do you think about that? So you very quickly become a convener, a problem solver. Yeah. And it's quite different, being very honest, to the role and the skills that you use when you're a minister.
It's different to what you saw from afar, because until you're in that job, you'll never know.
No, and I've been a minister for a number of years. I've watched Taoiseach, I've served under Enda Kenny, Micheál Martin, Leo Varadkar, but until you actually do the job, you don't know. And then the second part is how much international work there is. Yeah. And again, I was aware of that, but until you're actually doing it and juggling those demands, being a member of the European Council, going into rooms in Europe where the door is shut behind you and the only people in those rooms are prime ministers and presidents of European countries. So it's a big change, but I'm up for it.
Yeah, I know you are, and you say it, and I can see it. Did you at any stage when it was happening feel, God, that was quicker than I expected, or did you feel, this is fate, this is how it is? Would you rather have been 47 or 27?
It was entirely quicker than I expected.
Was it?
And I can tell you there was nobody more shocked about this than when Leo Varadkar made his decision than I did. I didn't see it coming.
You didn't have a sense of it?
No, I really didn't. And while I'd never made a secret about wanting to lead one day, I didn't think that was going to be right now. Yeah. So that was a surprise. But what I learned in politics very, very quickly and quite a while ago is it's not like a kind of career that you can plan everything out neatly on a sheet of paper and say, in 5 years I'll do this and in 10 years I'll do that.
Yes.
Moments come and you either seize those moments or you let them pass. And there's many people in Ireland, if you look back through, and you're a great history buff, but if you look back through, there's many people who've been described as the best Taoiseach we never had, people who decided not to go for it, for better or worse. So in politics, if you want to lead, you've got to take the opportunities when they come about.
Yeah.
I also think age is kind of irrelevant. I think in this country, and I love our country, but I think sometimes on both ends of the spectrum, we can be a little bit ageist. Somebody's too young or somebody's too old. Whereas really, what is age?
Yeah. Exactly.
It's a number.
A number. I think one of the other things about you is I don't know much about you, which is kind of interesting for somebody so well known and in such a powerful position. If international listeners should be told, by the way, Taoiseach is Prime Minister. It means chief it's the Irish language word for chief. And that's what you are, the chief of this country. And yet I don't know an awful lot about you. When you decided to go for the big job, can I ask you, did you talk to your wife about it, or did you say, I'm in? Or did you say, let's sit down and discuss it?
I talked to her about it, but I don't think she was terribly surprised at
Did you tell her about it or talk to her about it?
No, I certainly talked to her about it. But look, I think she I think she knows the passion that I have for the work that I do.
Yeah.
So I don't think she was terribly surprised in relation to that. Look, I try to keep my life, I try to keep different parts of my life separate in the sense of, I try not to mix my political life and my personal life too much. But and that helps, because that helps, I think, keep you grounded. Yeah. So my family aren't terribly involved in politics. They're obviously a great support to me. And they provide me with the space and support to do the job that I do. But
how did you meet your wife?
I met my wife through a mutual friend from my hometown of Greystones, who was a nurse, and Kiva, my wife, was studying nursing, and we met at a 21st birthday party.
She introduced you and said you should meet Simon. Is that it?
She introduced us. Yes. No, sorry. We were all at an event in Bray.
Yes. And so it took it off from there.
And took off from there.
Okay. We're going to get to your first book. That is the book from your childhood that you brought in from your bookshelf. But before we get to your choice of book, can we have a sense of you as an 8 or 9-year-old at home? And tell me about the setup, about siblings, parents, and...
Sure. So my parents, Mary and Bart, we live in Greystones, County Wicklow. They still live there. We all still live within close proximity to each other. They're both from Dublin. They moved down to Greystones when they got married in the 80s. I was the firstborn. And 3 years later, to the day, on my birthday, my sister was born.
Wow, most unusual.
Very good family planning, or I'm not sure, but that's
some things you can plan.
My siblings and I try not to dwell on it, but my sister Gemma was born on my third birthday. Something which never bothered me, but she never particularly liked growing up having to share a birthday with her bigger brother.
Has she forgiven you yet for that?
She has. Oh, she's a great sister, and in fact, she looks after all the birthdays and all the family occasions in her house. So that's my sister Gemma was born on my third birthday. And then my brother Adam was born in 1994. So I was just gone 8.
Yeah.
So there's 3 of us. I'm the oldest in the family, my sister in the middle, and then our younger brother.
And your folks, what's their background? Were they working or?
Yeah. So my parents have had a variety of jobs. My mother was a special needs assistant.
Okay.
And my father had worked in local pubs as a barman, and has been working for many years now as a kind of self-employed hackney driver in Greystones, and is still doing that to this day.
Still doing that to this day. Does he?
He picks up a lot of queries.
I was going to say.
He picks up a lot of queries. It's kind of like a mobile constituency office.
I was going to say.
Yeah, it can be useful. Except when he forgets to get the full details. Like, I met a man today, and the man, the man, and I'm like, no, tell me the man's name. Oh, I forgot to get his name, and he wants you to do this. I'm like, okay, that's going to be hard to follow up.
So they get in the taxi. They see the Taoiseach's dad driving the cab and start. Is your dad a very convivial sort of person?
He is. He's very convivial, and he's been. My parents have been. My parents are extraordinary. Like, they've just been. They've just been really, really supportive of all of us. And no matter what I wanted to be in life, or my sister, or my brother, they would have done anything and moved mountains to help us and to support us. And my parents, as I say, weren't political. Certainly weren't party political. We're involved in things in the community, sports clubs and parents' associations and the likes over the years. But like, the amount of leaflets my father and mother have dropped for me over the years, the amount of cups of coffee they've made for canvassers, the amount of things they've done to help, and that's, I suppose, the love of a parent. But I'm very grateful for it.
What age were you when you went? Well, it's interesting, that politics thing. And was it a newspaper article? Was it watching an event on television? Was it a movement in your life, or was it a moment?
So it was a couple of things, but principally it was my brother. So he's to blame. So those who wish I wasn't a politician or in political life or the Taoiseach of the country, you can blame my brother Adam Harris, because
we'll put Adam's email up on.
Contact Adam. Adam, as I said to you, Adam was born when I was 8.
Yes,
and Adam was diagnosed with what we called Asperger's syndrome. Not a terminology that's used now. I think it's kind of referred to just as autism now. Mm-hmm. But Asperger's syndrome, high functioning autism, would have been the sort of language used back then. And I was beginning to kind of enter my moody teenage years, as many do. Yeah. And as a moody, opinionated teenager, I would have seen. Well, firstly, I suppose I would have had to grow up a little bit quicker. So, despite the love and dedication of my parents, obviously, when you have a sibling with a disability, it does mean the other siblings, I think, mature a little bit quicker. So probably my sister and I both grew up a little bit quicker. I was also, I suppose, aware of difference in the world. And I was also very frustrated, without getting too deep. I was frustrated that we were living in such a wealthy country. And both so little was known about autism at the time. Made a bit of progress on that. I think Ireland's in a different place now, but a lot less was known back there, if you can think, in kind of the end of the 1990s. And also things like I was watching my mother having to, really kind of stand up for my brother and advocate for his needs, and really try. There's no pamphlet you're given or map. You're told all of a sudden, here's your son with autism. You're learning a whole new, which was a strange word to us at the time. You're learning a whole new world in real time and just trying to do your best for your child. So, long story short.
Well, I'm going to pause just a bit, because the image of your mother standing tall and saying, "Not on my watch." I just think that's pretty striking.
Well, there's nothing like a mother's love.
No.
And if you can, I hope I describe this correctly and politically correctly, but but just on a very personal level, if you know your child, and if you know there's something a bit different about your child and a little bit different to the two previous children you had, and you just know there's something and maybe you can't quite put your finger on it, and you're trying to navigate a system, and you're saying, but I know, will you please help me? And I watched my mum do that. And then I watched, as my beautiful hometown that I love so much, Greystones, there wasn't an appropriate place for my brother to go to school. I watched my mother having to drive him quite a significant distance to somewhere that wasn't particularly appropriate to his needs. And then I watched the happy progress of a local school principal saying to my mother, "Hang on, no, we'll sort this out." And then I watched my brother be integrated, for want of a better phrase, back into a mainstream primary school, given supports, and thrive, and be the, you always think of your little brother as a little brother, but he's almost 30 now, and be the incredible man that he is today, and now an incredible advocate for people with autism in Ireland, that he's become over time as well. But that, watching my mother and my father, but particularly in this instance around education, watching my mother not campaign in a political sense at all, but campaign as a mother, navigate is the right word, is something that has had a profound effect on me. And then that sense of, hang on a second, are there other families living with this in our community? Resulted in me calling a public meeting at 16 years of age in Greystone, saying, anybody living with autism, let's get together.
Wow.
And about 60 people turning up in a church hall in Greystones.
Yes.
And the stories. And the sense of relief in sharing the stories. Yeah. Oh yeah, my son's 7. Yeah, no, like when he was 5, like your son, that's how things used to be for him.
How liberating.
And liberating is exactly the word. And then we used to do things that were kind of, fun. We set up a group, we called it the Wicklow AAA Alliance, the 3 A's, autism, Asperger's, ADHD, and we'd kids with autism might have a difficulty going to the cinema because maybe the mom or dad would be worried they mightn't sit still, or they might,
or it's too loud or too dark,
sensory issues. Yes, yeah. So we'd hire the old cinema in Greystones, which, for what it's worth, is the cinema in the episode of Father Ted. Down with this sort of thing. Careful now. That's the cinema. We'd hire that old cinema, and we'd and everyone knew you could come along because the other kids there, everyone would understand.
Yeah, like-minded souls.
Like-minded souls. And then we started campaigning, and and long story short, I got sucked into the political world, and I always remember Enda Kenny, a now former Taoiseach, saying to me, as a moody teenager, you can keep on giving out about politics, or you can get involved and try and make a difference.
Wow, that was sage advice.
Sage advice.
And were you a reader as a boy?
I gorged on books.
Did you?
I loved reading.
Bookshop, library, parents' bookshelf. What was?
Library mainly. Bookshops, of course, as well.
Yeah.
But it was an avid member of the Greystones Library. And
I'm sensing you like Greystones. Would that be fair?
I love Greystones.
Yeah, I'm getting that.
I love Greystones. I'm from Greystones. So I didn't mention that.
No, please.
It's a beautiful place in County
Wicklow. I should say to people who don't know, it is a beautiful seaside town just outside the Dublin border, and it is gorgeous. And anyone who knows the Happy Pear, for example, will know Greystones, and anyone who loves, there's a lovely bookshop, little bookshop there, a couple of bookshops there.
Was home to Ronnie Drew, great place. Michael Collins was there before he went to the treaty negotiations. Great history in Greystones, but I'll come back and do a podcast on Greystones.
Greystones, yeah. My Greystones.
My Greystones. But no,
the library there is obviously very good.
Library's great.
What were you picking off the shelves?
So I lived next door to a family called the McCarthys, and there was a girl called Quiva McCarthy in the next door house, and she was the same age, and we pretty much grew up together as great old friends for years. And the two of us were avid readers, and we'd be getting nearly the same books and nearly racing to read the books. I mean, these are my childhood memories. I remember the MS Readathon.
Oh, yeah. Roald Dahl was. I was a little bit, yeah.
So this idea that you'd go to school and you'd do the Readathon. How many books could you read in the month of, I can't remember, March?
Yeah.
And you'd go out and you'd get your sponsorship and raise money for MS Ireland. These are the sort of things we were involved in. And Roald Dahl, the famous Five, Enid Blyton, Secret Seven,
all the greats,
Goosebumps, on to Harry Potter. I mean, this was.
Did you Potter it up? Did you go book for book or?
Yeah, I think I ran out of ages a bit. I started with the first ones and then life got busy.
But you gobbled them up. You were a real voracious
But Roald Dahl's books, all of them. And the one I first remember reading myself, kind of independently reading, was SEO Trot. But
this is your book. Let's go to it. This is your first book today. Simon Harris has picked Roald Dahl's SEO Trot, which is a particular word that you have to hold up to a mirror or say it backwards. Isn't that right?
Exactly.
Do you want to talk to
an anadrome?
Is that what it is? Because it's not a palindrome for sure. Palindrome.
Tortoise is written backwards.
Thank you very much.
There you go.
And no, actually, it's. Is
it?
Yeah, it is.
Yes.
Tortoise. I was going to say it's Greystones written backwards, but it's so SEO Trot and is. So talk to us a little bit about this book and what's your memory of?
SEO Trot I always remember as a lovely little book, and it was a little book because I would have been relatively young when I was reading it.
Yes.
But it's a book about friendship and a book about love, and it's a book about two older neighbours, a Mr. Hopper and a Mrs. Silver, isn't it? And the friendship that they forge over a tortoise. So that sounds a little bit more benign. Mr. Hopper had his motives. He wanted to become friends, at least, with Mrs. Silver. And Mrs. Silver wanted to have... Yes, so it was a children's book.
I was thinking... Thanks for the reminder.
Mrs. Silver wanted her tortoise, Alfie, to become larger and was having trouble growing the tortoise. So Mr. Hopper used to go out and replace the tortoise secretly with bigger tortoises. So the tortoise grew over a period of time.
It's a metaphor, I'm sure, or euphemism, but either way.
But ultimately it got them talking and it got their friendship, and little did Mrs. Silver know that the tortoise wasn't Alfie getting bigger every night, it was Alfie being replaced by Mr. Hopper. But it's a simple book in many ways, but it's a book about friendship. It's a book about neighbours. It's a book about love, and it's a little bit of a book about loneliness,
Yeah.
In terms of people wanting to reach out and also forging common interest. And it's one that introduced me to the readings of Roald Dahl and introduced me to reading in general.
And did you go for the whole Dahl thing, the twits, the witches, Matilda? I mean, what Roald Dahl, as we always say, because he's my one, if people say, what's your childhood? I would have gone for Roald Dahl as well, on the basis that he understood the darkness of childhood. He understood that adults can be quite angular and tall and shouty, and children are sitting there going, don't you realise you're essentially Gulliver and I'm from Lilliput? The adults are quite ghastly, to use a Roald Dahl word.
He had an amazing, I mean, he just wrote in a way that held my attention as a child, to the point that I'd remember Fantastic Mr. Fox, another one of the great books. I'd remember picking that up and literally not putting it down. And to keep the attention of a child is something quite challenging. Right. And to have that ability to get a child's attention, that you can compel them from the beginning to the end of a book, and to do that repeatedly through a whole series of books is quite incredible.
This is going to sound disrespectful, but in my world, it's not. It's a compliment. Were you quite the nerd? I mean, is that fair to say? And do you embrace that and do you own that? I mean, it took me a while to get it, and I realised I'm on the nerd bus. In fact, I'm probably driving it, but I love it because you meet fellow nerds and you see them in schools, and you just know what they are. There's a geek chic now,
So I must lead into it. No, I mean, I'm not sure I was as nerdy as you, but I don't do it as well as you do it. But I was
leaning in before leaning was invented.
But I think I was. Yeah. I mean, I was always very curious. I always liked, I had a very typical childhood. I was thrown into the soccer club, Greystones United, and there it is again. And my dad managed the soccer team, and this just was not for me. Oh. And I stuck with it for a while until I remember persuading my dad, who was the manager of the team, to let me be in goals. And I think I must have let about 7 goals in about 10 minutes. Brought mass humiliation to my family.
So not a sporting legacy to speak of.
Love sport, enjoy sport, love watching sport, but no, that wasn't going to work as a sustainable kind of career into the future. But so I mean, great friends. Yeah. Tried out lots of things growing up in my hometown. But reading Greystones, I think.
Thank you.
But reading was I stopped myself saying.
I know. I could hear it coming. I just let it out. Rather lean in, as you say yourself. But reading
was a big part.
You were a sociable kid.
I was, and I had great friends. And in fact, my school friends and friends that I've had from the age of 4 are still my best friends.
That's good stuff.
And I have a group, I have a group of friends, that have been literally with me and me with them right through primary school and on.
If you're in the pub, what are you ordering for yourself?
Heineken, probably.
Yeah, pint of. Okay, good. Just get that out of the way because I just wasn't sure what you do. But you do have a social life beyond this job.
I do.
You did.
It's not. I did.
Past
yeah,
tense.
I did. I mean, and this is not a complaint. I mean, when you sign up to be Taoiseach, a kind of basic requirement of the job is you will be busy and work hard. So that's fine. But I don't have much time for socialising now. But I do have a great group of friends that I can trust, that I can confide in, and that I know are always there. And also these friends that, whether you see them now today or drop them a WhatsApp and mightn't see them again for 3 months or 6 months, you just pick up as though you saw them yesterday.
Yeah,
and that's very special.
Yeah, I've got them too, and I call them commas. Because there's no full stops with these guys.
That's really good.
And you get to the next comma going, where were we?
Yeah,
and
exactly.
that sentence just like you described
And
there.
that's so nice.
Before we leave the Roald Dahl, your first book choice, which is of course your childhood book, you've got 2 children. Do you mind me talking about them for a moment?
Sure.
And tell us their names and ages?
So Saoirse is my daughter.
Yeah.
She's 5. She'll be 6 in January. She just started primary school. And our little boy is Killian, and he's just turning 3.
Okay. They're in reading zone.
Oh, very much so.
Well, Killian might be eating the books, but certainly is picking them up. And so, what's the house rules with regard to reading or nighttime? Because you can't be there every night. You're late.
No, they demand it. They demand, and I use the word demand. Like a bedtime book is a part of the bedtime routine. And whoever puts them to bed, whether it's myself or my wife or the grannies, and we lean in a lot to Nana and Granny, who help us a lot, and I appreciate that. But there's always a bedtime story. In fact, there's 2 because they each listen to each other's. They insist on each picking a book each night.
Yeah, clever.
Julia Donaldson.
Is
the
godsend. Godsend.
I mean, because she's just written so many amazing
and
books to keep my children happy, and they're not that long.
It's the key for the tired
parent.
parent.
They're not that long, actually. Yeah, that's true. They're not that long.
Do you do the voices?
I try. Yeah, I try. I try to. You have to hold a child's attention.
Yes.
But they love that. And then my daughter's on to, now will I get this right? Isabel Moon.
Okay.
Isabel Moon, I think.
Right. They're illustrated sort of books, are they?
Yeah, these are books. They're more of the size of the SEO Trot kind of rolled out.
Small but perfectly
and she's beginning
formed.
to learn to read as well. So, but they both love books, and that's something I'm trying to pass on to them that was given to me by my parents.
Good. Can I get a bit serious for a moment with you? One of my biggest concerns when I see your story in the headlines is the business of people that you're hanging around your house protesting. And I think about your children there as a father and as a member of the public. Mm-hmm. And I think about you inside or your wife inside or the kids inside. How are you with that? What is that like?
Yeah, so it's not pleasant. I mean, I try not to talk about it too much for obvious reasons. And look, and I've seen this happen outside other people's homes and people, political opponents of my homes. And I just fundamentally think it's wrong, no matter whose home it is. You may have seen me, I kind of bristle when the word protest or protester is used because I think it does a disservice to the act of protest.
Is
polite language on this podcast, but I think it's a form of thuggery. I think it's a form of intimidation. I think it's a form of harassment. I think it's done to unsettle and unnerve people. I think it's done by people to let they know where you live. I think it's disruptive, and I think it's deeply unpleasant. But I'm also grateful that my children are of an age where I try to shield them from this.
How do you do that?
As much as possible.
How can you do that? If you're hearing this chanting or whatever outside the window, and what are you doing to be dad?
So. I mean, we just try to keep them away from this and, other things. I mean, look, it's happened. It's a matter of kind of public record. It's happened at bedtime. It's happened at bath time. It's happened generally when I'm not there, actually, because I'm often in work still at that time. But it's something that's not right. We should say this, though, because it doesn't... There's 2 things. I have attended protests and I have been protested about. And both are good and valid things in a democracy. This is neither of those things. And then secondly, we shouldn't ever allow it kind of distort our view of who we are as a people, because it's not the norm. So it is a very small number of people who kind of move from location to location stirring trouble.
Do you ever feel responsible in a sense of some sort of regret that you took this job on and therefore your kids have to put up with this, or your wife, and you think, oh, I could have made it all much easier if I didn't go for this job, if I wasn't in this job? Does that cross your mind, or do you just think, look, I'm here now, realpolitik, got to deal with it?
So, of course, the safety and well-being of my family, as it would be for anyone, has to be the priority and always will be on that kind of human level.
Yeah.
But I also feel very strongly that, we live in a really functioning, vibrant democracy, and I'm not going to allow a small group of people distract or deter from what I've been entrusted with, or indeed impede on my family's life or any family's life. And look, there are laws, there are cases being investigated. There are things that are not legal and right to do, and we'll let them take their course.
Let me ask you one last thing on this, which is 10 Downing Street, the White House on Pennsylvania Avenue. I presume President Macron has something similar. We have ours in Neutron. For an office that isn't half as powerful or a third as the Taoiseach's office, the Prime Minister's office, why don't we have a residence a la the one in Farmley, where you get the job, you move in with your family, and it is up sticks and all the rest of it, but should we be thinking about that now with security and rethink? I know whoever does it first will get grief for going, oh, who does he think he is, or who does she think she is? It might be you, might be the next person. But we'll get over that. It has to. But has that crossed? I know that there was talk at one stage, I don't know whether real or imagined, that they wanted to move you in there for your safety and security. But don't mind your own case necessarily. But broadly speaking, do you see the sense of the argument that we have an official residence for the Taoiseach?
I think it's something that I can see. I can see how it arises, and I can see how it arises from a number of things. One, actually, kind of efficiency in terms of being able to, meet people, carry out meetings.
Yeah.
I can understand. I can understand, and I can also understand from a security point of view how it actually is operationally easier to keep somebody secure and more efficient for the guards. Look, I've. This has been put to me on occasion, and I've thought about it. The challenge for me, and I've been very honest about this, apart from loving Greystones, but the challenge for me is that my kids are of an age where one has just started the local school, and I just it would be very disruptive. But look, these are things that I don't know where the future brings us in relation to this. But I can see it happening in the future.
Yes, okay.
I can see it happening in the future. And by the way, I don't think the people of Ireland would be unsupportive of that.
Do you think so? They think they'd accept it for what it is?
I think so. There's already a resident owned and the likes, but it's not something that I'm intending to do.
That's the Farmley.
This is Stuart's Lodge House attached to Farmley. Yeah.
Let's move on to book number 2.
Yes.
This is the book that made you cry. Not everyone has a book that makes them cry, but you've chosen a really interesting book that brings us back to your brother, brings us back to your introduction to politics, and I'm intrigued to know your take on this book. A lot of our listeners will know what it is. So why don't you introduce the book to us and tell us where it came into your life or how?
So the book is The Curious Incident of the Dog in the Nighttime, which is so well known. I mean, it's been an incredible bestseller. It's won the Whitbread Book of the Year award. It's extremely well known. It's been turned into a production, which I haven't seen.
Yeah. No, I believe it's very good.
But I believe it's very good.
And what
too.
is it about for those who haven't read it?
So it's very interesting because if you read the back of the book, it references Asperger's syndrome, but it doesn't actually reference it in the book. But the book itself presents in the blurb on the back that it's about a boy called Christopher. He's 15 years of age. Christopher has Asperger's syndrome, which again, as you know, as I've already said, there's a link with my own family and my brother Adam in relation to that. And Christopher finds a dog that has been killed, Wellington, his neighbour's dog. And Christopher immediately kind of goes on an inquiry as to find out what's happened to Wellington, the dog. And as the book is unpacked and as the story is unpacked, you see that it's a little bit more complex. Christopher thought his mother had died. Turns out his mother hadn't died. She'd, for want of a better phrase, ran away with the man next door. Christopher then...
There's no better phrase than that.
I can't think of it.
It's perfect.
And Christopher then embarks on a journey
yes.
To find his mother, and does. And all of that is very exciting. But for me, the relevance of the book to me, and the reason, cry is a strong word, but certainly the reason when I read this book, I actually felt a great sense of relief.
Why?
Because finally there was a book being written about difference. And the feeling that I have, I don't mean personally, but the memory that I have of growing up in a in a family with autism is that sense of loneliness and isolation, which has somewhat improved in the sense that we talk more about it and there's maybe more public awareness, but is not where it needs to be at all. And the idea that there's now a best-selling book and that the kind of hero of the book, and certainly the narrator of the book, is neurodivergent.
Yeah, and heroic.
Yeah, exactly. It is really powerful. Yeah. And even then, like his adventure on the train as he's heading on the train to get to London, and he's encountering crowds of people. I can remember so many summer holidays or events we went on as a young family that we had to leave because my brother couldn't, again, for want of a better phrase, cope with the crowds or the noise or the smell or the sensory issues. I remember many nights out cancelled. And just to have a recognition of that world and also an insight into that world, because as you say, this guy's the hero.
Did you feel,
my brother's a hero, and
your brother is a hero, and in fact, I've interviewed your brother more than I've interviewed you. Yeah, which is to say,
I'm Adam's brother everywhere I go, and I'm very proud to be.
And you're your dad's son. Funny enough, if you get into a taxi, as you know,
it's true.
But your brother is an extraordinarily articulate advocate for this world, and this book that you've chosen, The Curious Incident of the Dog in the Nighttime. For me, as somebody who I don't think I have autism in my family in the sense that maybe undiagnosed, I don't know, but in terms of the broader, this book really helped me get a handle on it. So when you see a young child, banging the ground in a supermarket,
exactly,
rather than going, would you think that parent would get that child under control? You go, what's happening?
Yeah,
is everyone okay here?
Yeah,
this book made me more empathetic, perhaps try to be a bit kinder. Yeah, because we don't know.
No, we don't. And
I don't know.
And I know, and you're so right.
You lived with it.
That image you talk about being in the supermarket. I've been there as the bigger brother, hearing somebody saying about the younger child, "Why is he doing that?" Or, "Geez, can that parent not just sort that issue out?" And
what are you thinking when you overhear that sort of casual?
Well, back then as a child, I mean, you're either feeling a sense of embarrassment, as a child. Oh God, come on, you're drawing a lot of attention to us here in the supermarket, Adam. That's just human nature. But you're also feeling on occasion a sense of anger. I want to go up and tell that person they don't know what they're talking about. And look, the more we can do to recognise that, even leaving autism aside, that neurodivergence, is very prevalent in our society, and there's people who view the world and function in the world different to other people.
Thank goodness.
And thank goodness, that's right. Yeah. And actually, the book, for all the darkness, I mean, there's a murdered dog and a missing mother, and for all that storyline in this book, the happy ending, that the child is reunited with his mom. He's feeling optimistic about his future. He's going to university to study maths, and that. So I think this is a book of hope, but it's also a book, while it's a great story, where we the reader are being educated about difference. Even subliminally, as we read the book, and I think Mark Haddon, the author, has done society a great service as a result.
Great, okay, great choice of book, and that's the book that made you cry. I don't know if you actually wept, but
no, I did. But
it moved you.
It moved me, and it made me go, phew. Yeah, somebody else is talking about this.
What makes you cry?
Oh, what makes me cry? I don't know. I'm quite an emotional person. I think I'm quite an empathetic person, but I'm quite an emotional person, and I find the situation in the Middle East and Gaza and the likes very hard to fathom, and very hard to consider it through any lens other than death and destruction for children. And I find that very hard to comprehend how we can live in a world that we allow that to happen. And
is that a father or a Taoiseach talking?
Well, you see, you can't separate everything. You're a person, aren't you? And you bring your life. But when I turn on the television and can see young children, I think literally, that could be any of our children.
Yeah.
Like, this is just cause of circumstance.
Yeah. Did that help drive your decision to recognise the state of Palestine? I mean, it was a massive thing to do. It was very quickly into your assumption of office along with 3 other countries.
Yeah, we were one of the 3: Norway, Spain, and Ireland. Yeah.
Did that drive that, or was it more political than that?
Being honest, it was more, what can Ireland do?
Yeah.
So like, this is a country, as JFK said in his Dáil speech when he addressed the Dáil back in the 60s. We're, to paraphrase him, a small country that has always had more influence in the world than our size would necessarily lead you to believe. So what kind of country that is militarily neutral, only 5.3 million of us in this jurisdiction, what can we do that's practical to try and keep the hope and the hope of a two-state solution alive, to keep the Palestinian state alive? What can you do? And the recognition was seen as important, and I think it was seen as particularly important that we did it with other countries. So Norway, the history that Norway has, the Oslo Accords, and Spain as well, a larger European country. I think the three of us coming together, it was a practical thing that we could do. And I spoke to President Abbas, the president of the Palestinian Authority, the day I think we recognised the state of Palestine, and he thanked me, but not me, thanked the Irish people for the hope we had given Palestine. So,
did you get any grief on the world stage from others for, because the Israelis were clearly unhappy with what happened?
They were.
Did they let you know that in no uncertain terms?
They did. And look, this, and I said this on the day, this is not about, I never like our country to be positioned as, are you pro-Palestinian, are you pro-Israeli? We're pro-international law. We're pro-human rights. So like Israel is a state that has a right to exist securely and safely. And I'm absolutely confident that if you strip away the politics and don't see Israel through the prism of one person, Netanyahu, there's mums and dads in Israel too who want their kids to be able to live safely.
It's hard though.
So like we have to, like you can't say, and I've said this to other leaders, you can't say that if you're in favour of a two-state solution, you have to really, how do you get there if you don't recognise there are two states?
Okay, we'll move on to our third book, which is the book that changed your life. And interestingly, you've brought, let's just take the book that you brought in, one that my daughter bought last week. I haven't read it, but I've heard really good things about Patrick Radden Keefe's book, Say Nothing. It's quite a distinctive cover, and the word on it is really good. I just thought, do I need to read a book about this story or not? I'm intrigued to know why you've chosen this book.
If you don't mind me saying, you do.
Okay, good. Okay,
and I actually think we all do.
What is it?
Particularly those of us of a certain generation or age.
Yeah.
Yes. Those of us who didn't live through this, I feel there's almost an obligation on us to read this or material like this.
Okay.
And as the Taoiseach now, I feel a particular obligation because I am, through the office I hold, a co-guarantor of the Good Friday Agreement.
Yes.
But to plan the future, you always have to understand the past and the context. And this book did make me cry within the first few pages, because it is a book that tells the story of the Troubles, particularly the Jean McConville abduction.
And a quick reminder, if you would, of Jean McConville.
Jean McConville was abducted. She was a widow of 10. She was 38 years of age. She was abducted, murdered, and then disappeared. As in body buried, disappeared. From her, and taken from her kids by the IRA and killed in the Troubles. And the book starts by telling you that, so it's written really like a novel. It's written through almost as a detective book, trying to piece together what happened.
Yeah. It's a really smart way to do it.
Which is a very smart way, really smart. But it's just absolutely heartbreaking because when they burst into the McConville household to take Jean away, they tell her children, don't worry, your mum will be back shortly. Yeah. And one of her children, Michael from memory, asks, can I come with my mummy? And they tell him yes, he can, just to persuade Jean McConville to leave the house. And then when they take him out, they run him away. And Jean McConville is killed and never seen by her children again.
Accused of what?
Accused of touting, helping the British. A lot of this is still
discussed.
The subject of history and legacy. But she was for helping, for assisting, for being humane. But what is really, what is fascinating about the book is that Keefe, and I actually heard Patrick Radden Keefe talk in the Abbey Theatre at the 20th anniversary of the Good Friday Agreement, and he talked about how we have a peace in Ireland, and of that we do. We live in an island where there aren't bombs now. And we should never take that for granted. And my generation should never take that gift of peace for granted.
I would call it, sorry for cutting across, because it's just, as you're talking about generations, you're 37, I'm 51. And, in the back of my folks' car, the radio was on always. And it was, Catholic killed in a taxi today. Next day, Protestant killed in retaliation for day after day after day. Bus explodes. If people understood, if you lined up those poor bodies in fields around the place. It was 3,000, an extraordinary number of people.
Yeah.
God help us. Like, it's very hard to understand that. And we've just been talking about the Middle East. Now, it's not to compare and contrast, but just there was a lot of ugly, grisly death. It was dark, dark, dark.
I mean, 3,636 lives.
Right, that's the number.
That's
My
the number.
goodness.
That's the number. 3,636 lives. And but what got me about this book is a couple of things.
Yeah.
3 things really. One, just the brutality. The widow being taken from her 10 children.
Yeah.
Secondly, as Keith goes into it, the fragility and frostiness sometimes of the peace. And he did speak about this in the Abbey as well recently. So we have peace. That's great. But that wasn't the end point. The Good Friday Agreement is a living document. We need prosperity. We need to know each other better. I said this, and some people criticize me, and maybe they're right, and maybe I don't know, but I believed it, and I still believe it. There are some people of my generation more familiar with Paris or Berlin or London or Manchester than they might be with cities in Northern Ireland, because, and like,
why would people give out to you for saying that?
Well, some people,
sniffy.
Some people, yeah. I didn't think it was particularly controversial. I was making the point that to embed peace, and John Hume used to talk about this so eloquently, we have to get to know each other better. So actually, what's my job as Taoiseach now? Not just to say, that's great, people went before us, did the Good Friday Agreement, let's keep it ticking over. Not at all. It's to say, well, what is our shared future? How do we get to know each other better?
It's a work in progress.
And that is a work in progress. And then the third element that stuck with me in this book is that there are still difficult issues unresolved. And without getting too deep, I mean, legacy, reconciliation, truth and justice. And that work is not yet complete.
Interesting you should mention that. This idea of a Truth and Reconciliation Commission, where, didn't they do it in South Africa, where everyone sat down and said, look, I did this to my neighbour, or that neighbour did that to mine. And, I wonder, is that needed? Is it too late? Is it too damaging? Do you have any thoughts on that, or do you?
It's definitely not too late and not too damaging.
Okay.
I think what we have to do on legacy, though, is we have to have a victim-centred approach. So, again, without getting too far into the politics of it, I'm excited about the fact that we now have a British Prime Minister who said he's going to repeal this Legacy Act. This is the act in Northern Ireland in the UK, but it's the act that basically tries to draw a line under all of this. It's not supported by any political party at all in the North. That should tell you something. They don't agree on a lot. If every single one of them is against it, and all the victims groups. So what we need to now do is get back around the table, engage with victims groups and see what is the best way forward, but we can't avoid it. And can I just say one other thing on this? When I was temporarily the Minister for Justice for a few months, and I met the families of the disappeared.
Yes.
And I've actually been on one of the searches for Columba McVeigh.
To a beach or a field?
Up in a bog in Monaghan, I think. And to this day, there are still a small number. I think there were fewer than 20 people disappeared. Thankfully, many have been recovered, but there are still a small number of people who their remains have never been given back to their loved ones. And I met these families, and they're getting older. And I met these families, and I remember one person at the meeting saying to me, I've met them a number of times, saying to me, I never thought I'd be so looking forward to a funeral. All they want is to bury their loved ones, to give them a Christian burial. This is how they say it to me. Yes. And mums and dads have gone to their graves, not ever having recovered their sons or daughters' bodies. So, and there are people still on this island today who have information that could help resolve that issue. So I suppose I'm very optimistic about the future. I'm very optimistic. We have a peace process. We have a way forward. We have a structure. The bombings have stopped. But it's also work that we have to keep at.
That's Say Nothing is Patrick Radden-Keefe's book, which I will, next time I meet you, I'll have had it read and we can talk about it in other detail. You've met Prime Minister Keir Starmer. How'd that go?
Very well.
On a personal level, nice person?
A very nice person, a man of integrity, a human rights lawyer by background, which is a great perspective. Was there prosecutor at one stage. A good, sincere man.
Good.
Using language that warms my heart, a co-guarantor of the Good Friday Agreement, recognising that there's a part of this island, the North, where under the Good Friday Agreement, he and I and our governments are co-guarantors and we need to work together and cooperate.
That's language you needed to hear.
It's language we needed to hear, and quite frankly, it's language we hadn't heard in a long time.
Yeah, so that's good. You were in Paris, President Macron. How did you get on with President Macron?
I think Emmanuel Macron is a super brain. I just think he's
very bright man,
very bright, very engaging. Look, we had conversations on a couple of big issues. We both have peacekeeping troops in Lebanon.
Okay.
Obviously, the situation in the Middle East is precarious. I continue to push my case around the need for the EU to do more to help bring about a ceasefire in Gaza. Good conversation about that. But we also talked about the Olympics because obviously they've hosted a very successful Olympics. And I was very proud to be there after our best Olympics ever.
It was an amazing haul of medals, wasn't it?
Amazing. Our highest haul ever. But also beyond that, which is great, our largest team ever, a gender balanced team.
Yeah.
The last time the Olympics were held in Paris was 1924, 100 years ago. We sent no women. And the men who went, if you think about it, it took days for their families to find out if they'd won, right? You weren't going on your Twitter or your X or your whatever. Now we have a gender balanced team and constant coverage. So it was a really, really good Olympics. And credit to, and they lifted the mood of our nation, which was
they sure did. We get to the point in the interview here where we ask you about the autobiography you haven't written yet. And it's too early for your autobiography, obviously. And it's probably too early to ask you, would you write one in due course?
I've only started the job.
I've got to say, it's a part of it.
Wayne Rooney wrote an autobiography in his 20s.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
No, I love writing.
Do you?
I love writing.
As in, what are you writing?
So as in, I just...
you like writing your speeches, or do you keep a diary? Do you?
I don't actually keep a diary, but I do try to keep kind of interesting trinkets and notes and stuff that may spark memories in the future.
Good.
But I even wrote a play when I was a teenager. Like I like writing.
What was it called?
On the Run.
What was it about?
Kind of works about politics too. But
I'm going to run.
It was about children who went off.
What was it about?
It was about a group of children who went off on an adventure, and I staged it in a local parish hall. But I was involved in speech and drama growing up. I like writing. It's how I like to express myself, and even to this day, because as you can imagine in my job I'm giving copious written briefs.
Yes.
But like the way I brief is I scroll on my own. Even if I have it in front of me, I'll write it back out in my own hand. That's how it goes into my mind. So would I in the future write a book? Perhaps. Would anybody read it? Who knows?
Could we have the title of it?
Oh wow.
Yeah, I mean, you have to think about what your life would be in a book title. I mean, it's quite a hard question. But
that is quite a hard question, and I truthfully have no answer for you yet.
Yeah, okay. But you know what? That could be the title itself. I truthfully
have no answer.
John Boyne picked. He quoted the Queen Elizabeth II when his book title was "Recollections May Differ," which I thought was.
I met her once, the Queen.
How was that?
You met her too, of course.
Unmemorably for her, but for you, I'm sure it was. How was it? She said one word to me, which was "splendid," and that was it.
Well, I tell you what she said to me. So she, and by the way, I think Queen Elizabeth did so much for peace in Ireland, and her visit was incredible.
It was.
But I mentioned this to her son, the King, recently when I met him, because I met her in the convention centre.
Oh yes.
And Olivia O'Leary was moderating it, you might remember. And there was a little kind of we were put in pods. That's how you meet royalty. You're kind of put in pods. And as you know, the Duke of Edinburgh came in and worked one side of the room. The Queen came in and worked the other side. And I was in a little pod, and she was introduced to me, or I was introduced to her, and she kind of looked me up and down, and she said, "And what do you do?" And I explained I was a newly elected TD, member of our Parliament, and she again looked me up and down and said, "They start you very young here," which I thought is true. But then I thought she became the Queen very young too. So, but I didn't think I wasn't quick enough to.
Oh, that's good. That's good. Good, Jan. And as you say, that visit was pretty extraordinary.
It was magical. Can I tell you one more thing? I've just on the issue of books and where we're at in the world right now.
Sure.
I met President Zelensky, the president of Ukraine. I've met him on a number of occasions, and I met him abroad recently. And
what do you make of him?
I think he is phenomenally gifted at understanding how to keep your people and your country motivated and the world interested in your struggle at a time when there is so much busyness in the world. I think he has an extraordinary energy, self-belief, and I say that in a positive way. And and I wish him well, because his country's under attack, and we have to. There's a war on the continent of Europe.
But you met. You were telling a story.
Yes. He gave a number of prime ministers and presidents a gift, and it was a gift of what I presumed to just be a photograph or the likes. So it was. I don't mean this rudely, but you tend to get these things when you go abroad in exchange of gifts. So it was a frame basically, and it went in a bag, and somebody took it away. And anyway, it came back to my office a few days ago, and it's kind of left aside for me to have a look at. And I looked at it again, thinking this will be a photo of Kyiv or some part of Ukraine. And I looked at it and realised this is a rather peculiar thing to have framed. And you know what it is? It is a singed cover page of a book. And below it, it says, I can't remember the exact details, but it says something like, this is from a library that was bombed by Russia. And this is now a book, one of thousands that will never be read and knowledge that will never be shared.
Whoa.
And I just thought, in a conversation about books,
gosh, what an impactful
You can see that, yeah.
And to give it to the Taoiseach of a country renowned for literature, writers, poets.
So it hangs in my office now.
Wow.
And it's just, obviously the brutality of what's happened with the loss of children and civilians and everything else, but just I just thought a books that will never be read, knowledge that will never be shared, and it just is, it'll hang there as a constant reminder to me of the suffering that's going on in so many parts of our world.
I think that's a good point at which to conclude our conversation. Barring you want to tell everyone when the election's going to be, I think we'll call it there.
I'm looking forward to it.
I'd say you are, actually.
I love campaigning.
I know. I'd say you are. It'd be interesting. It's such a shootout then to see what happens afterwards. It's going to be intriguing.
The only thing that is certain in Irish politics is that people who predict outcomes of elections generally get them wrong. And our system, and for any listener from abroad, our system is so... We won't even endeavour to explain proportional representation to listeners of this podcast.
Might be easier to explain how to make sausages or loaves.
But it's very hard for people to predict outcomes in Irish elections, which makes them all the more exciting for those of you who follow them.
For sure. Taoiseach Simon Harris, what a pleasure to see you.
Thank you so much.
I really enjoyed our conversation and tiptoeing through your life and getting a little insight into what makes you tick. I'm not going to even crack that joke that could have followed. And if nothing else, we know where you're from. But we've got a great insight into who you are. And I wish you and your family happiness and safety and security, and good luck in what you do.
Thank you so much, Ryan.
So here's this week's Ryan Recommends, brought to you by Eason, Ireland's favourite bookseller. I'm going to go with Heart Be at Peace, the latest book by Donal Ryan, one of my all-time favourite Irish authors. This is a slim book, and I say that because if you're not a big reader and you just want to kind of get an entry, a gateway drug into bigger, better books, start with this one. He has written a host of books, starting with The Spinning Heart, so you can go all the way back if you want to. But this book is a kind of a sister or brother of the first one, The Spinning Heart. And if you remember a show called Pure Mule, you'll get a sense of what it is. It's the middle of Ireland in the 21st century. It's dark, it's dirty, it's difficult, but it's beautifully written, and all these characters are so well studied. It's short, it's compelling, and it is otherworldly, is what I'll say. This guy writes, it's like you've eaten the most beautiful meal. Donal Ryan, Heart Be at Peace. You will not be disappointed. I'd nearly tell you I'll give you the money back if you don't like it, but go for it. This book and all the books we discuss on this episode of our podcast are available now in your local Eason store, or order them online from easons.com before 6 p.m. for same-day dispatch with free delivery when you spend over a tenner. Eason, be inspired.